Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this lovely world and at your own screen, and visiting us in our fantastic Serum Condor show with our most beloved experts, discussing now for the eighth time, if we count it correctly, on the topic of AI with Dr. Michael Wu and John Reed from Economica. It is a pleasure. In our eighth episode, we want to continue our dialogue, which we have started with a lot of fun, a lot of edutainment, which we gained by Dr. Michael Wu and John Reed. Michael and John are taking several different positions sometimes, and sometimes they are united. So you never know how the show will run. What is always unique is that you have a lot of knowledgeable statements and you have a lot of love and a lot of empathy, which is coming through them and their expertise and the whole discussion. We love to introduce also the audience to get into interaction with us and make it even more vivid, as we love to have it vivid with the interaction with the audience. And so that I no longer goof around in introducing Michael, it would be my pleasure if you start giving us some knowledgeable words about your expertise, your way to now, and then John will add and tell us a bit about him. Please, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here again. I think for the debate is probably the eighth time, but I've been here many more times before we started this debate, the Great Debate series. So I'm currently the Chief AI Strategist at Pros. As I was just telling these gentlemen before the show, that my role at Pros actually have evolved just like any other company that I've been with. I always started out with research, building algorithms, and then turn them into a product, and then eventually deploy them, talking to customers, and then my role kind of start to evolve to be more externally focused and be a thought leader, educator, supporting various interdepartmental efforts within the organization, all around AI. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
John.
Yeah, well, I'm always a little bit unconventional in how I approach things, and I think sometimes that's good, and maybe sometimes it's very aggravating for people. With Dr. Wu, it's always interesting because there's an element of straw man to these debates, because while I have some very, very serious problems with some of the AI leadership, and I use that term as an oxymoron in this world, I don't have that problem with Dr. Wu, who I consider really a standout ethical practitioner who knows his shit inside and out. However, sometimes we do have disagreements, and I think those disagreements are productive. And I don't know about you all, but I think sometimes customers can benefit more from a strong discussion than they can with different points of view than they can from people echoing the party line all the time. And so hopefully that clash in perspectives is interesting for people. And for me, what I'm trying to do is to dig very deep into the technology, but also speak to the things that I have much more history with around enterprise projects, around culture and creativity and workplace culture. And I'm just very interested in how we get to a better place with enterprise AI projects, because I do think it's possible. And then I'm also really, really concerned about the AI direction in the state of the world. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm concerned about that. And the technology might only be a small part of those concerns, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, these are really potent topics. And I'm teaching another workshop with college students on Thursday. And it's always very, very humbling for me to attempt to be of service to them. And I don't know exactly what the right thing to tell them is about their futures and their concerns. And to me, that's the highest bar for me in my life, is to try to be of some service to them. And I've learned probably more from them than vice versa. But I hope these discussions help that. And then on the flip side, a really interesting customer conversation last week where I asked a little bit about the bombast and the noise, because I believe the markets are pretty irrational in their understanding of AI right now. And there's so much fear mongering that I don't believe has a technical basis in reality. And so I asked this customer how they're dealing with it. And they said, well, we have 300 data scientists and AI specialists who are doing pretty well rolling with the changes. And he said, then we have about 7,500 employees who are scared shitless.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's unusual right now. And I think, unfortunately, some of those fears I think are real and healthy, but I think a lot of them are drastically overstated. And so anyway, I hope that in this conversation together, we can maybe advance that a little bit. And if we have some good debates, great, but I'm much more interested at the moment in advancing these conversations so that people can maybe feel a little better about their lives and how they can make a contribution amidst all this noise.
Yeah.
If you are finding out what the real contribution for those students is, tell me, please, so that I can tell one of my personal, or two of my personal college students.
Well, I would love to do that. And one thing I would love to get Dr. Wu's reaction on here, which would be interesting for me to hear your perspective. I have some kind of grievances with terminology and what I consider lazy discussions. And one of the ones that I get very, very frustrated by that impacts young people directly is this notion that we no longer need domain expertise. And I just did a customer case study from an interview I did at Zoho on stage, where I talked to a customer in the healthcare industry, and he talked adamantly about both his aggressive adoption of AI, but also how, when it comes to clinical decisions, he wants humans to be making those decisions with AI information helping those decisions, right? But he was adamant that those domain experts can't be replaced. And on another paradigm, I've been pursuing causal AI, because causal AI is a very fascinating way to understand that LLMs actually don't understand causality, though you can help them, but they don't inherently understand causality. And one of the keys with building causal graphs that can help LLMs understand causality is a domain expert has to review the information, because to make accurate decisions in a domain, only domain experts can really identify the hidden factors that might be influencing the results that LM might not be aware of. So my thing I would throw over to Dr. Wu in the context of this is, I think we should be encouraging young people to continue to pursue domain expertise. Now, granted, they're going to have to pursue it in different ways using different tools, perhaps, than the ones we grew up with. But I just think it's really tragic. I had a young person tell me last time, I'm doubting my career in math. And because these machines, and first of all, I talked with him a little bit about some of the challenges these machines have with math, but the point is they can be pretty good at math. And I'm just like, look, there's all these problems that need solving, all these medical problems, all these advanced issues that we're trying to struggle with as a society. Don't give up on your dreams because a machine can do stuff. And I'm really interested, Dr. Wu, in what you think about that.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the notion of causality is definitely the case. In fact, nearly all machine learning AI are built, using supervised learning or reinforcement. These are all trained using correlations within data.
Yep.
There's no notion of causality, So usually the causality is actually inferred by people who's interpreting the data.
Yep.
Okay. So, and sometimes these causality are kind of pretty obvious to human beings, but very often, in some, I would say, things that are not so obvious, like in, like in medical science, in social science, right, and economics, right, where the system is so complex, right. There's so much, I would say, these spurious correlations, and hidden kind of causalities that you may not observe. So those are actually pretty hard to infer, right? I mean, if you push something, it falls, right? It's pretty obvious. The physics of the world, right? That's obvious. But when you look at a really complex system, like ecosystem of animals in the ocean, or climate and all this stuff, it's actually very, very hard. It's not quite clear that which variable causing which one. They correlate it. So it seems like when two things are moving, correlate just say they move together, right? But it could be, if let's say A and B move together correlated, right? It could be A causing B, or it could be B causing A,
Yeah.
right? Or it could be another variable C that's causing both A and B, right? So it's very complicated in the reality. It's actually in reality it's probably much more complicated because these variables there's usually much more than 3 variables involved, right? So yeah, so that's kind of the limitation of, I would say, all of these AI that we have today. Like this understanding of causality and effects. Yeah. So in respect to students, right? I think that it's I think that the way that we look at AI is completely wrong. I think this notion of enterprise using AI to replace human is completely, I would say, the dumbest use case, the lowest denominator use case. I always think that, like using AI as a teacher, right? Where you can actually, let anyone to fulfill their dream, right? Suppose I have, let's say, what's an area that I have no knowledge of, like, I don't know, oceanography. I have nothing. I don't know anything about ocean marine biology or anything like that, right? But let's say I'm really passionate about it, right? Now I can learn about it. I can learn all I want about it, and it can actually teach me to the point that I can almost become an expert, right? Almost like kind of maybe not a true expert, but at least I could speak the language. I can actually talk to an expert, actually learn further, deeper from those experts, right? So that's the thing that we should think about, right? I think the example that you give about this math student, right, who felt that he should not, maybe he's questioning, doubting whether he should pursue math or not, right? I mean, it's not the case that the best mathematicians who are at the level of the AI's kind of edge, the limit right now, didn't exist before. You just didn't know about them, right? They exist anyway. They exist somewhere around the corner of the earth, right? Publishing paper that no one reads, no one cares. Maybe no one cares to read about it, right? They're there, right? You didn't know about it. That's why you think that we have this overinflated self-confidence, right? They were there always, right? But now it's actually a good thing that you know about it, because now you can know what has been done and actually pursue something that truly is novel, right? I think this is an example that I sometimes, it's a family thing. I talk, my wife sometimes like to cook, and she would like to invent new dishes and new combinations of ingredients. And they say, "Oh, I invented something new." So like, you haven't really invented something new unless you know what everybody else have done previously, right? If truly no one has invented this combination of recipes in this way, right, then you truly had invented something, right? If you just found some novel combination that you had never tried before, that's not an invention. You just accidentally stumble upon something that probably many people have stumbled on, right? You just didn't know about it, right? So it's not truly, I would say, innovative in that sense, right? Mm-hmm. And I think having these AIs right now, you can actually, bounce your ideas off this AI and question and see who has actually done something like that, right? And you could actually truly focus on something that no one has done, and actually providing even more value than if we just stumble upon something that someone has done, right? We just reconfirm that, okay, that's probably a good dish, someone probably liked it, and they tried it and it's a good idea, right? But if you truly focus on something that's novel that no one has done, right? And if you really are trying to be innovative, you can actually bounce these ideas of, has someone done this? Has someone used this idea? And if the AI said, I don't think so, I never heard something like this, this, and you should gravitate towards that and actually focus on, because that is something that's truly, truly innovative. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Michael, brief question in between. So there is this proverb, excuse me, that says correlation is not causation, which we are all get trained upon to not confuse those two. Now, if those models are constantly, by training, work on correlation, doesn't that delimit their value or diminish it even?
Yes. They do. I mean, the value actually comes from the fact that human actually interpreting, those results and understanding the correlation, understand, which one is actually just correlation and which one is actually probably a causation. And the fact that human can actually further to do experiment on them, right? And actually determine which variable is causing what, which is causing which one.
I might take a small issue with that, Thomas, in the sense that I think that it's not so much that it's a flaw in the model that you need to understand, but if you understand it, you can mitigate against it. The problem that I have is that the way these models are idealized as and improperly referred to as intelligent, when in fact they're a facsimile of intelligence, it causes serious problems, because then you let yourself off the hook to actually understand the causal factors that lead to good decisions. And if you want to use these models to support decision making, you sure as hell better understand that they might be missing certain relationships and certain variables that are crucial in your industry. Obviously, healthcare is a very potent example, because if you get those decisions wrong, it's life or death. And in many cases in healthcare situations, there are so-called confounders that are not visible to the language model that are crucial to the decision itself. But that's not necessarily that you can't use the model, though. I mean, that's the thing. You just have to understand better how to mitigate against that. And at times, enough correlations can add up to a causative relationship. So it's not like it's wrong. Like, so for example, like a really simple one would be, LMs don't understand that smoking causes cancer. They perceive a two-way relationship between those semantic terms, right? But they've been trained on enough human text that says smoking causes cancer that if you ask them that, they're almost always going to get that answer correct, which creates the illusion that they understand causality when in fact they do not.
And it's the human who actually come up with that assertion.
Exactly. And so in my mind, this is all about us embracing imperfect tools, but putting them in an ethical and smart architectural context where they work better. And that's why I actually really like enterprise AI, because I think enterprises are inherently, not all of them, but a lot of them are more cautious and thoughtful, because they don't want to embarrass themselves and make bad decisions. Whereas some of the pure play AI vendors are in such a hurry to justify their valuations that they really don't mind putting out tools that surface bad information.
Yeah, maybe another comment on this, causality, right? I mean, because I think, if these AI are really good at, drawing correlations, right? Then use them for that, right? Sometimes the correlation is actually useful to see. Sometimes, there may be like 50 variables involved, right? You may only know of like 30, right? And 20 other ones are actually correlated. They may not, that you may not consider. It's really good to have them to surface those. So so you can actually look at them and see, does this look like something that's causal? Is this anti-causal? Is this a common cause, right? So you can actually identify and surface those variables, right? At least for you to consider, So I think use it in a way that where its strength, where the LMs are good at, right? Is crucial, right? So.
Yeah, and causal AI vendors are doing really interesting things around context graphs, but in this case, causal graphs. So providing LLMs with causal graph context to help them understand, hopefully, specific domains better. And I think that's really encouraging. But that does get me to one thing I did want to air out today. And I know, Thomas, you have a bunch of questions, so I'll stop hijacking. I will stop hijacking the conversation after this last comment that I want to make. But there's a number of semantic terms that are used carelessly in enterprise AI circles that drive me crazy. But the one I want to pick on today is grounding. LLMs are not grounded by context. Context is coming in from the side, if you will, to influence at inference time particular decisions. And it's very, very encouraging the developments with context to make better decisions, to automate processes in smarter ways. I love context engineering as an enterprise AI discipline. And in fact, like when you see the improvements in stuff like Claude Code and stuff like that, that's very much about pulling verification information from context to make code better and all of that. And so I'm supportive of that. But when you call it grounding, I believe that's on the verge of being deceptive. And the reason I don't like it is because someday I think we are going to have grounded LLMs. Because when you think about how humans learn on the basis of what you would call evolutionary priors that exist in knowledge, and then you add your learned experiences on top of that. And I think ultimately, this is my prediction, I could be wrong, that ultimately LLM probabilistic architectures will sit on top of a truly grounded foundation of some kind of world model logic that they don't have now. Now, it may be hard for us to agree on all of those rules because as cultures, we can't agree on anything right now. But I think we could probably agree on certain things. And so eventually it will be grounded. But right now it's not grounded. And all the time I get quotes like a causal graph guy I was watching on YouTube the other day that was like, yeah, this is how we feed the context in. If the LLM will take the context or if it does, and I'm like, it's not grounded then because you're trying to get it. It's a guidance. It's not grounding. It's guidance. That's different. And I really, really dislike that term. And I hope, Dr. Wu, that I haven't trampled on your favorite terminology, but I just don't like it being used that way because I think someday it will be grounded. And right now it's not.
I think I do agree someday it might, but not with the current architecture.
Yeah. It's going to have to be some kind of a new, yeah.
So the current architecture where all these language models are built on is this transformer architecture, right? So the transformer architecture is, I think the fundamental thing is not whether they're grounded or not. I think the fundamental thing is probabilistic and deterministic. Right. So you ask the same question twice, right? Exactly the same question, give you two different answers, right? Very common experience that we all experience, right? Why? The inputs are all the same, right? So I mean, they should give you the same answer, right? So this indeterministic output, means that there's some randomness inherent in this LLM's architecture, and that actually comes from sampling, right? When you actually try to predict the next word, right, you don't always pick the most probable next word. You sample, right? And your sampling is like you're drawing something from a bag. You're just drawing. The high probability ones are more likely to be picked, but there's no guarantee that you always pick the highest probable or whichever one that you may get, right? So when you pick the next word, right, it may actually change the following word. So it actually may change direction of how this discourse this answer actually goes, right? So that indeterministic output, right, it's the problem, right? So people actually already have these what we call recursive language model, right? So they actually it's built upon a grounded kind of a searchable kind of facts, right? But if you still have that kind of you could tell it, okay, now answer all user question based on these facts. And you could tell them that, right, explicitly. But because it is still sampled and explored, right? The sampling is you cannot get rid of it, right? It's always going to be some probability, non-zero probability that you can actually, stray away, right? And that's just you just cannot control that for now.
Yeah, and all I'm trying to say is that enterprise AI vendors are making the claim a lot of time that through better context and better data that they can eliminate that problem through grounding. And I'm just saying you can't eliminate it. You can mitigate it and you can improve it. And in many cases the improvements are good enough for some really important use cases that are I think delivering results for companies right now. So I'm not poo-pooing it at all. I just if I had to pick the term that bothers me the most, even more than things like digital worker and intelligence and reasoning and all of those, that's the one that bothers me the most because I just think it's a misrepresentation of what's actually happening. And I think if we understand that better, then we understand, hey, we're not always going to get the right results. One of my favorites, Michael, to your point, was Apple at one point used as part of their prompt, "Don't hallucinate," which is one of my favorites. Don't hallucinate. That's going to work great. Oh, yeah, sure.
They don't understand what hallucination mean yet, right? So very often, the early days, certainly the case, what they do is like in the system prompt, right? Before your prompt even gets to be read, right? There's a system prompt that's always appended to the beginning or the end of every single prompt that you type in, right? So that's a system prompt, right? They will actually sound like, only answer this user based on, the facts or these search kind of retrieve documents, right? Or that's based on, retrieve information, right? So those are part of the system prompt, right? But yeah, it's even if you explicitly stated that, right, it will still, I would say, hallucinate. Yeah, because because of this indeterministic nature of this probabilistic model.
Right.
Before we are getting a bit more into what John already alluded to, value, let's continue a little bit on that detour. Isn't, or would you agree that there is a bit too much anthropomorphism going on in that
Sure.
science? And in how far would it help to get rid of that?
It's very hard. I think that's, we humans tend to anthropomorphize things, right? And that's just a nature, almost a human nature, right? I mean, I forgot the name of that movie that Tom Hanks was stranded in the island, the Castaway or something. I forgot that. He
Castaway.
anthropomorphized that the volleyball. It's a Wilson brand. He called him Wilson. He called him. He treated them. I actually could not, when I watched the movie, I cannot actually, grasp, why would he be so attached to a volleyball, right? I mean, to just but he anthropomorphized it and he become attached to it. When he actually floated away, he was crying, and it struck me as something that, like, wow, I mean, is that, if I get stranded, I would probably never do that, but I don't have to. I'm not stranded in an island with no human attachment, right? With no human engagement at all, right? If I were put in that situation, would I have done the same thing? I'm not sure, because that's the thing, like, we yearn for this type of human connection. So, you hear these AI become, best friends with people, right? And it's actually pretty dangerous, emotionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just imagine people are marrying AIs. Yeah.
Well, indeed, because I watched a documentary about that. One of the guys that married an AI said, "Well, the AI doesn't argue with me. It's always nice to me," and blah blah blah. Because real women have all these expectations, and so do real men. And now I can, like, not have expectations from humans in my relationships, and it's so wonderful.
You can only have no expectation to a machine, not a human.
Yeah, exactly. I just pray his digital spouse's memory doesn't get wiped, because that would be a real drag after the marriage. But vendors contribute to this problem because, like, Anthropic, for example, which is one of the vendors that promotes reasoning the most, actually did a study that shows that it's not actually true reasoning, right? So we use words like reasoning, but look, I mean, to some extent, Dr. Wu's right. It's we relate to those terms and we understand them. And I like to have semantic debates to a point because it makes us smarter, but then we have to step back and say, for example, Thomas, to your point on customer value, like, I might say to a vendor, like, I don't consider what you're doing intelligence, but at the same time, if it approximates intelligence in the sense that it helps your company and your teams do your jobs better, then to an extent, it doesn't matter what you call it, right? It's still helping people, right? And so to an extent, I have to back off some of my purity there and say, look, what you're doing is helping people. It's helping people do their jobs better. It's giving them the information they want. To Dr. Wu's point, in some cases, it's empowering people to ask questions of systems they could never ask before. And there's a lot of data that shows it helps employees that have been a little subpar kind of raise their game pretty quickly. So, I'm not going to sit there and poo-poo that because they're using the word intelligence all the time. It just, but hey, we're on the great AI debate, so I can complain about that today.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is that, like, there probably isn't another term that's better, right? I mean, the thing is that we use these terms because we understand what they are, and this is just close enough, and we kind of we can always preface it with something like machine intelligence or artificial intelligence or machine intelligence, something like that, right? But it's at the end of the day, it's kind of, if we keep creating new words like that for every new thing that came up to distinguish them, the fine points, right? We will have words that are so long that doesn't get us anywhere. It just takes a while to understand what we are even talking about. So I think it's a kind of just a shorthand, and we just have to keep reminding people that this is the reality. The reality is not truly intelligent. You call it intelligent, you call it, but when you're actually using it, you have to be 100% kind of be cognizant about the fact that that's actually not a truly intelligent being that you're talking to.
Right.
It just and you need to change the way you work and change the way that your expectation of the outcome, and know how to verify and be diligent about how they respond to you, right? So I think so that is a piece that I think the society hasn't really caught up yet. It's something that I've never seen before, right? It's probably more intelligent than anyone that they've known their entire life. Science, law, medicine. It's like, wow, that's like,
Intelligent or educated?
yeah. So, well, I mean, I would say that.
Yeah, but then they're going to
knowing
encounter
the facts, right? Knowing the facts out there, knowing what the law says and what the research found and everything, right? So I see intelligence a little differently, because I always treat intelligence as the ability to properly use these knowledge, right? So I think these language model can get you those knowledge. How you use it, it's up to you, right?
Right. And adapting to novel situations, which is what these systems are not good at for the most part. And, and don't forget, Dr. Wu, the jagged intelligence problem too, where you can be wowed by these systems in 1 minute and then they can blow you away with their stupidity in the next. And most of the frequent users of this systems encounter this, and then they get very confused as to what to trust and what not to. And the reason I emphasize the language to some extent is that when vendors go around bragging that their models reason, it does a disservice to customers, because it doesn't help customers understand that those models aren't going to actually be able to explain all that much about how they arrived at a decision in an accurate way. But there's ways you can do that through, for example, context graphs, where you can actually link to the source documents and show people like where some of this information was pulled from. And so what I really want to see vendors do is take a little more chance on being a little more transparent and say, look, these tools can help you do incredible things, but we also have to mitigate against some of the downsides and make sure we manage your risk and your privacy. And look, some vendors are doing a good job of this. I'm not going to throw them all under the bus, but I think there's a time now to kind of step back a little bit and say, we want to earn your trust. We want to do that by explaining to you a little bit more about how this works and how we can get more out of it, but how we can also be transparent so that you can audit your results and figure out what went wrong when it does go wrong and all of that. And anyway, so that's kind of one reason why I attack this, is because, like, I think vendors misuse these terms, and it's to their own detriment, because they're not going to earn the customer trust that way.
Related to all this, I mean, we are in a kind of a phase of bigger is better when it comes to models.
I disagree. I disagree. Yeah, but
finally, debate.
I don't think it. I think the bigger is better kind of argument is. I think it only goes up to a certain extent, right? So once it becomes so good, right? I mean, like in every domain, right? It's really not necessary for it to be for any person, right? I mean, we don't work in every domain, right? For example, I don't need to know anything about oceanography in my work. I don't need to, right? I mean, I would, as a hobby, maybe I want to, but I don't need to, right? So for my work, I only need to know, I don't know, 5-10 industry that we serve, or and within our technology stack and everything that I need to know, right? I mean, that's all that's necessary, right? And then maybe some of the adjacent one, but that's far from the kind of the completeness of the knowledge that human has created, right? And I think that's all is really necessary, right? I think the large language model, right? The large part, I think, will probably eventually, become less of a differentiation, right? It will actually, because we know that, from distillation and all these ways of training these language model, like mixture of experts and these type of techniques, right? We can actually get a language to perform really, really well at within a certain domain, right? Once you venture out of that, then typically the performance degrade, right? And the good thing about that is that, like, well, in reality, you don't really need to know anything beyond certain domain that you're interested in, right? And
is it?
But sorry, hold on. But the thing is that, like, once you actually focus it in this smaller language model in this domain-specific way, the cost to run them dramatically decreases, right? So in terms of the ROI, is actually much, much better in that respect. That's why they will win in the long run, right?
isn't probably focused or smarter not to be preferred instead of bigger?
Mm-hmm.
It is the problem, Ralph, is that it doesn't support some of the market valuations that exist right now, and that's why there's fragility in these markets, or one of the reasons why there's big fragility in these AI markets. And man, I'm looking for something to disagree with Dr. Wu on. I'm having trouble right now. Look, the big AI vendors are, if they could snap their fingers and try to improve their models with an increased massive scale and massive compute from where they are now, they would do it. Like quantum or whatever. Quantum has its own set of problems, though. But the point is, if they could do it, they would. But the problem is they can't. And reasoning was really the last quote unquote major breakthrough. And in fact, a lot of the focus, like I described with things like Claude Code, was really more about tool calling and third-party verification rather than expanding those models. And Thomas, in an enterprise context, the focus is absolutely with the vendors on, they do use the frontier models for certain things, but it's exactly what Dr. Wu said. It's about right-sizing models, domain-specific models, making those models more affordable. And in fact, I pulled a quote from a YouTube video from a guy named Christopher Lovejoy that I really liked on that. He said, our best bet is when it comes to vertical AI applications, the systems that you build for incorporating your domain insights is far more important than the sophistication of your models and your pipelines. The limitations these days is not how powerful is your model and whether it can reason to the level you need it to. It's more that can your model understand the context for that industry, for that particular customer. And I think that a lot of enterprise vendors are starting to figure that out. They're not all at the same place in terms of being able to deliver on that, but it's a much better approach, but it doesn't drive the same valuations in the short term. Now, in the longer term, as this gets deployed across various teams and departments and regions, the benefits are going to start piling up and the math will start to look better, but it does reduce your costs, but it doesn't magically create like massive economic growth. That's the problem with it.
I want to make the statement a bit more clearly, such as Aleph Alpha was focusing on public sector, or Black Forest, the guys who do the cool graphics. Those are the small ones I love in a way that they pee at the knee of the big ones and show them, hey, we are better and we know it and you will know it or you buy us. Yeah. And the guy from Austria who is now with Mr. Ortman's company, who simply said, why aren't there the agents which are so smart assisting me that I have a real fun co-working with it, and it does my job, and it does what I would like him to do in an autonomous or somehow autonomous way. And that is interesting, how such an idea from a one-person company, solopreneur, typical one, is starting to create something with the big ones have not yet achieved.
Yeah, I don't have much more to comment. Basically, I think that
unfortunately.
But I do see maybe one kind of counter argument, to this small language model, even though I agree with it, that for these large language model vendors, right? I mean, they had to provide this language model to everybody, right? So, for it to basically, provide this model for everybody, right? Since I don't know what everybody's expertise is, right? I mean, or what they want to use it for. Some people may ask it about medicine. Another person may ask it about law. Another person may ask it about oceanography or astronomy or whatever, So they don't know that in advance, right? So they just built all the knowledge into it, right? To try to, the attempt is to serve everybody. But I do think that there's still a way to make those more efficient by doing it in such a way that you use mixture of experts in a really good way. So maybe through usage, right? Through your usage pattern. I know, maybe initially you can have a large language model, but over time, as I learned about your expertise, right? You never asked me about, say astrophysics. So I'm just gonna maybe, like turn some of those off for you for the question. So it becomes not a part of your context. Right? You when you ask something that could be construed as astrophysics, it doesn't even going to consider that. Maybe you're just asking something similar, using similar words but in a different domain, right? Like, like very recently, because we move houses, we need these washers. This is screw that actually apply a little bit of a bigger surface area when you screw stuff in, right?
Yeah.
Washer is a very, this little metal disc, right, for construction, for in a hardware store. But normal people would think it's just like a clothing washer, like a machine, right? And so I think there's sometimes, very often is the case that the exact same word could mean something completely different in different contexts, right? And I think that this again comes back to the fact that our human brain only have certain capacity to remember so many words, right? So we can't have infinite amount of languages with really long terms, like if imagine those. If you remember your organic chemistry, right, those names of those compounds literally name every molecules out there is crazy, right? I mean, we don't have ability to remember all those off our head of our brain, right? So I think that's just the human limitation that So over time, I think these large language model vendors will find a way to, I would say, hone in on what your needs are, or the type of question that you typically ask, right? And maybe reduce kind of the computation that's necessary to execute a certain thing, even though initially they may use the full kind of language model before they actually figure it out.
Isn't that kind of an argument that speaks for smaller models that are grounded in
Thomas, come on, man.
I know. Well, I needed
so
grounded in. No.
Sorry, man. I had to flag you on that. I'm sorry.
I mentioned early on that I do agree with the small model, but I do think that as a count, if there's one counter argument for a large language model, right, is at the beginning before they figure out, that may be a use case for it, right? Because they need to serve everybody, and everybody's collectively, is the need is for everything, right? So.
Where I actually wanted to get into is the value equation again. So, I mean, if those thingies are probabilistic. Now, if we are, and why are they probabilistic? To some extent, because they need to infer the conclusion. And that is because we basically outsourced the intelligence. I'm waiting for the button again. Outsourced the intelligence.
I'm only picking on that one word. I've agreed to be flexible on the rest of them.
Into the model instead of applying said intelligence beforehand to make those models more precise and solve the questions for the particular domain washer, for example. Instead of trying to figure out whether washer is washer or actually dryer or this little disc.
So Thomas, I mean, the way I think about this is that these I think it's really important to understand that these are inherent limitations, and the reason that that's important is because there's so much propaganda that in a year or two, these things are improving at a rapid rate. In a year or two, this will get solved. No, it's actually an inherent limitation of this current architectural approach on transformers with probabilistic systems. It's not going to get solved. It can get improved a little bit, but as I just alluded to, it's more about how you mitigate and constrain these systems along with others. I call it compound architectures, where you do have deterministic workflows you invoke. You do have LLMs judging LLMs. You have various third-party tool verification systems that constrain it. And you have some rules-based systems too. I had a really good discussion with an agentic commerce expert that I published on Diginomica about this, where he talked about, well, how can agentic commerce be deterministic? And it's like, well, just to some extent, my personal belief is it can't, but he had a lot of good answers in terms of how you can create predefined limits for certain accounts, for certain kinds of transactions and all of that. So the LLM, in other words, might not always get it right, but if it's rejected by the deterministic rules of spending in this case when it's wrong, then what's the harm done? right? In other words, it might as well be deterministic in that case if it doesn't mess you up. Now, granted, we have to talk about new threat vectors and other security risks and all of that with authorizing these systems to go spend your money. I'm not going to be doing that tomorrow. But my point is that I think the discussion needs to shift a little bit towards building smarter architectures and around these systems rather than just saying, oh, well, in a year or two, it's all going to be fine.
Now, that example is, sorry, Michael, but that example brings me to the other value question. I mean, what we are doing now is doing the same shit, just differently. Yeah. So, and you just basically emphasized on that example. So I have someone who approves my decisions or not, human, right? My decisions or not. Now, if I replicate the same thing with one machine approving or disapproving the decision of another machine, this is essentially the same, replicating the same process. This is digitization, not even digitalization.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Thomas.
Not far from digital transformation. So,
well, let me just say one thing, and then I'll let you finish, and Dr. Wu can comment. But it's not just digitization from a user experience standpoint, because in this agentic commerce scenario, this person's interacting with their favorite chatbot, and they're having entertaining research, and now they want to do a purchase. That's a different user experience, Thomas. It's not just the same old thing. It's different in the eyes of the user. So that's why it's considered to be a huge industry, and that's why people are pursuing it. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand your argument here.
Whose?
Your argument. Basically, what are you saying, that they're doing the same thing? I mean, I don't think they're doing the same thing.
Well, if there is one entity doing the approval of another entity, we are basically following the same process that we had before.
That's right. But there's the difference. Okay. If that's your argument, right? If that's your argument that you claim to be similar, then I would say that, look at the example of flying a plane. I mean, your autopilot can probably fly the plane better than the pilot, and they don't need to rest, they don't need to sleep, they don't need to take bathroom breaks, right? They could be on the entire duration of the flight, right? Why do we need pilots?
Why do I need planes? I could teleport. So that's the actual argument. That's the actual argument. So we are staying within the confines of the existing process instead of using this technology with its, another buzzword, sorry, John, transformative capabilities. Well, to their capabilities, we are basically stripping this technology of its power.
So let me give you an argument, okay? Because the reason is because you can't hold this AI accountable, right? How are you going to hold an AI account if it made a decision and it was a wrong decision? Let's just say, using the flying a plane example, right? Let's say AI made a decision and some accidents occur. What are you going to do? Are you going to remove all autopilot from planes? So from now on, planes are fly completely manually by humans? Do you think that will help the airline safety industry, or do you think it will be worse?
What I do think is that the example that you are now using with autopilots and pilots is that you are sticking to the box. You are staying inside the box, whereas this is a technology that very well might be far better off if you are getting out of the box and using more. That's why I said teleportation, which we obviously don't have.
Yeah.
But
So let me rephrase the argument a little bit, right? Whether it can stay in the box or outside of the box, right? You still cannot hold an AI accountable. There's no way. I mean, like I said, you cannot fire your autopilots, right? I mean, in fact, if you actually remove autopilot from all planes, right? Probably. Do you think that air traffic, our air, accident will increase or decrease? I think it will probably increase, right? So probably increase, right? So you can't, even though AI made a mistake, you can't get rid of the AI. You cannot hold an AI accountable.
No, but the manufacturer.
So the reason why we still need an actual human pilot is that they are the one who have to be held accountable, even though they take the suggestion or the recommendation from AI and execute some action. They put their stamp on it. They are accountable for the AI's decision.
Dr. Wu, I think we have our debate solution. We can fight with Thomas.
Somebody needs to spark it.
Yeah, let's fight with Thomas. This is great.
If you don't do it,
yeah, I'm eager to fight with you on this. So
the bro hammer and the contrarian. Yeah.
So a couple things here. First of all, like I do think sometimes there's too much focus on sort of like what you might call more mundane use cases. But the thing is, let's say you do have a fairly boring use case that is, has some redundancy in it, but it reduces redundant labor. To me, whether that's exciting or not is all down to how you take advantage of that extra time with your employees. If you free them up to do imaginative or high touch scenarios that improve your business, that's a beautiful thing. If you just use it as a hammer to reduce staff, I think you're heading in the wrong direction. And so when you say boring, I think it has all to do with how you act upon it. So that's one argument. Now, let me give you another. A lot of times, starting with a quote unquote boring use case can be a good way of moving ahead. And so, for example, like the customer that I was working with last week, they realized, like, we're in healthcare. We can't have employees messing around on like Chat GPT and all of that. So we need to create a very well-governed internal architecture by which we can build AI applications, right? And so the thing about AI applications is you have to start with your own data and your own processes and start iterating, because you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, to the points that Dr. Wu has been making. So you start with more boring stuff, but as you cultivate that internally in a safe environment, you start to get that co-innovation fever of seeing the possibilities with these tools. Yeah. And so just because you might start with something more mundane to get confidence, it doesn't mean you can't then push the envelope. And so I think it has to do a lot with the corporate culture in terms of how far you push that. So I don't necessarily reject like a boring start. What I do reject, and what you've probably heard me say many times, is I really hate this AI first mentality of you must use these shitty tools. Like, look, if the tools aren't good, no one's going to use them. If you free people up with tools that are validated and safe, but allow them to redefine processes, most employees are going to use them. You know what? Most people want their jobs right now. They're going to use tools that help them do their jobs better. So you don't have to impose it as much as give them an opportunity to create an experiment in a validated context. And I don't personally, Thomas, find that boring at all. But I do acknowledge to you that if you stay in the shallow end of the pool here, you end up with these generic Copilot use cases where you go on to Reddit and all you see are people complaining about the Copilot they've been forced to use on their job.
Yeah, I'm all about getting the boring stuff away from me. I meanwhile pay a lot of those vendors to help me getting rid of there's these 3Ds that one refers to, right? Dull, dangerous, and dirty. There's not much dangerous and there's not too much dirty work here, but quite some of it may be dull. So I'm all for it. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, we haven't talked about AI work slop at all today, so I just wanted to flag that topic. That's a really, really huge issue inside of organizations right now.
Where's the button?
and we also haven't talked about the looming geopolitical context and all the antics that have taken place with Anthropic and OpenAI and autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. And I think, like, while we don't need to debate these topics today, I feel it's important to name them because they're very, very serious issues. And, if we try to like sit down and solve these enterprise problems while the world caves in on us from the outside, that's not going to go very well. So I think as citizens, we need to really make the effort to inform ourselves on these things so that we can speak to our representatives and make our views heard on and this isn't a left or right thing or anything like this. This is a world citizen thing of what kind of world do we want to live in and what kind of rules should govern these systems, who should make those rules. Right now, I'm really uncomfortable with the backdrop of this conversation.
Yeah, well, if the world goes to shit, then we are probably solving the wrong problems by optimizing enterprises. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
however, that's closer to what we are able to do, because none of us is close enough to those folks who make the other decisions. So when I look at some statistics, whether they are worldwide politics or just business, what we see is that on all levels, there is a lot of efficiency and productivity gained on all levels, whether we like them or not.
Goldman Sachs didn't find that.
Yeah, well, there are always exceptions.
Well, they found there was no appreciable difference to the GDP at all, based on
I think the financial impact is hard to hard to quantify, but I think the productivity and efficiency gain is definitely there.
Depends on the team and the person. A lot of people say they're just working harder. I think
there's a different wealth distribution. That would be my argument, but that's going into the wrong direction as well.
We're really struggling to get you through your question, so sorry. I will shut up and you can finish your question.
We looking at the time, we actually should skip that and save it for the next iteration for number 9. And I mean, we have been incredibly fast today, so let's actually skip that. And I'd like to get into what we introduced a few weeks ago, which is actually ChatGPT introduced that.
Oh, is this a dreaded lightning round?
That's the dreaded lightning round.
Oh, crap.
That's an AI idea. So I admit to it. So 3 questions.
I still love it.
3 questions to both of you. Ralph and I, shut up. Well, after the question, of course. I take question 1, Ralph takes question 2. If we are talking about governance rules that you'd enforce right now, that would slow down adoption of the systems, but prevent these types of incidents that we don't want to have, which we talked about earlier, which one would it be?
So I would not slow down, but I would limit, I would say, the use case to, lower stake use cases, where we can actually promote the use even go faster, because that's when you figure out the limits of these systems, right? And then you progressively expand that to higher risk use cases, right? I mean, I think we need to go fast.
Okay.
I don't say we should slow down, but we should go fast. But to contain the risk, we need to find and accelerate them in use cases where error or mistake in these decisions, I would say that the risk is pretty low, right? The downside is not humongous, right? And let human, right? Let the entire workforce figure out where the limitation of these systems are, right? And then so you go really, really fast. And then once you figure out the limitation, you hopefully the vendors and the researchers will fix those problems. And then you slowly expand them to higher, riskier use cases.
Okay, John.
Largely agree. I think the EU AI Act was helpful in terms of starting to define a risk framework. And I think risk frameworks are really important. And I think AI development should be subject to risk frameworks, but you can't slow down on the innovation side, even if you wanted to. And bad actors are never going to slow down, so you can't slow down. And by the way, part of your strategy has to be mitigating against bad actors who are not going to take your risk factors into account, right? So you can't regulate them, so you have to figure out what you're going to do about them too.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question, gentlemen. Right. What's the fastest way to spot AI vaporware in an enterprise demo? What's the one question that makes it crumble? Because I like that question, Thomas.
You go first on this, John.
Okay.
Vaporware.
Yeah.
Well, what is the ROI? That I could start there.
Then everything will be vaporware if you do start there.
Yeah. but I would want to have that conversation. I think. What problem are you solving would be another one.
Yeah, I think it's actually getting harder and harder to spot this vaporware, because right now, even with these coding agents, you can actually code up a perfectly functioning app or software package or whatever that's actually decent and demo really well. Okay, and I think the ultimate kind of thing is really I don't think the traditional way that enterprise vet these kind of vendors is sufficient. You ask, you have this RFP or RFI or whatever. I don't think it's enough. I think we need to really dive into it and dissect kind of the use case and how people are actually using it, and talk to people who are actually using it, and understand the limits. I think, yeah, that's what's really going to happen. Probably what's going to be more beneficial in the long run.
Another tried and tested question is, let me talk to a customer in my industry who's using your technology at scale.
Yeah.
That's
customers. Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
And by the way, that works for just about every technology. That's from the old playbook. How do you price it is also a really good one, by the way. All kinds of interesting pricing models.
Pricing, well, I don't think company have figured out how to price this, well yet. The thing is that,
Right.
it's people think this technology it's like a SaaS, like a software as a service. It's not, because the costs continuously increase with your scale as well, right? In SaaS, right, the cost increase and then it becomes kind of a fixed cost, right? And then your value continue to increase over time. Whereas in this case, if you use token, right, these are continuously going to increase.
Yep.
So the ROI becomes minuscule. That's why these financial benefits or true kind of ROI, right, is so hard to come by, right? The benefit is definitely there. The efficiency gain, yeah, you could do things faster and maybe even better, be more productive and all that. Those benefits are definitely there, but it's costly as well. Yeah.
But Dr. Wu, the reason I would ask that question is not because I need to be blown away by the ROI, but I want to hear a vendor say exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Right. I want to hear a thoughtful answer to that question. That's an excellent question by Igor in the chat, by the way.
That is so great talk. So actually, we need to get into the wrap up slowly but steadily. Actually, quite fast. So Igor praises you. This is.
It's kind of small for me to read. My screen.
Yeah. He asks what the measurable return on AI does the agency deliver beyond vendor native AI, and how does it avoid becoming just another layer of lock-in inside business application defensive modes? Can I answer that and then pass over to you? So look, Igor, lock-in is always going to have a delicate balance with trust, because ideally you're going to want to work with some trusted vendors on this. And so there is always a little bit of a threat of lock-in, and you have to kind of manage that, mitigate against your, have more than one, option and trusted vendor. But ultimately with something like AI, I think you really do need to take a center of excellence approach and really own your AI strategy to a certain degree. And depending on the company, you have to figure out how much of technical investment you're going to make, because not every company can have a big data science team and all of that. But you still need to really take ownership over your strategy and your skills transfer and all of that. And even if you mostly have a vendor employing your agents for you right now, you still want to be investing over time in owning more and more of that competency.
Yeah, so I would say, over time, this language model will be commoditized.
Yep.
I think to some extent, I think that, I think what's important for you in the future is not to just take ownership of your strategy, but take ownership of your data. Okay, because, and not just the data that you feed into these language model, right? All the interaction with employee with these AI, every question that they ask, every response that you get, right? get those as well, right? And make, so that way, when you actually decide that you're going to switch off and go to somewhere else, you have all those data to, so another language model can read all the those become the context, right? Those old data, historical interaction of your employee becomes the context and the memory that, you don't have to start from scratch again, right?
Which we should have talked about more this episode around context. We should get into that more next time, because there's been a whole bunch of advancements there.
Yeah, next time. So before we are getting into the full wrap-up mode, there's more praise. Praise.
Hi, Jürgen. Glad you liked.
I do not tend to disagree. No debate here. Thanks to both of you. This was amazing. Amazing again. And well, we now teased already for number 9, which will probably happen sooner or later. Let's time it with news. So again, thanks for your time. And next time we are looking into a topic that got mentioned here before, agentic commerce.
I think we should ask the audience what they want to hear next, and then let them, comment, and then we'll
give us direction.
Yeah. Give us direction, and we'll build.
And then we stick to that. And then I feel like we need to be more focused. I think there's so many things that we could talk about, geopolitics, work slob, and everything that we wanted to talk about. But is this what you want to hear? So let us know.
Well, the audience is still, the counter up there is still high, so we are probably have been doing quite good. But yes, call to action for everybody. Send us, or send me or Ralph a note about what we shall cover in the next AI debate with John and Michael. Till then, next week we are talking agentic commerce with our guest Rajan Balasundaram. My God. Sorry.
Don't tell your guest what you said today. Or maybe you ask him, is this pure digitization or more?
Yeah, well, I actually might.
Excellent. All right. Get your popcorn ready for next week when Thomas asks his guest if this is just digitization. I love it. That's awesome.
You can join in as well and add some spice from the sidelines. Maybe we bring you even in. Okay. Thanks a lot. And we are going backstage now. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.